So component 2, section C, is all about silent cinema. It's worth 20 marks, which is 20% of this component, or 7% of the overall A-level. You have 30 minutes to respond to one question on this topic, which you choose from a selection of 2. So, to clarify, you'll be given 2 questions in the exam and you need to answer one of them. And this will be a single extended response essay-style question. The topic here is silent cinema, and we'll be looking at the short films of Buster Keaton. The specialist study area here is a critical debate, and this time it's focusing on 2 different approaches to film which dominated early cinema. That's the expressive and the realist. So the expressive refers to a more fantastical and imaginative style of filmmaking, whereby the director creates images and scenes which could not exist in real life, whereas the realist style is a realistic approach which aims to depict and document real life and real events and give a sense of things which happen in reality. So we'll go into detail on those specific ideas in a separate video. To get us started, however, it's important to place Buster Keaton and these 4 short films of his within a context and learn a little about the movement of American silent comedy, the movement to which Keaton's films belong. So, Buster Keaton has been described as a true auteur. He wrote, directed, produced, edited and starred in all of his short films. He has a background in vaudeville, and that's a sort of stage comedy based on acrobatics and physical clowning. And vaudeville was immensely popular in the 1910s, and it's evident in his physical humour and stunt work which his films employ. Keaton performed all of his own stunts for real in often very dangerous situations. He was quite badly injured a few times, and any number of them, if they'd gone wrong, could have killed him. There's tons of videos on YouTube which you can watch of how some of these silent movie stars did these stunts, and they are mind-blowing. The length that they would go to get these shot, and they took it all very, very seriously. This isn't just sort of messing around. It's it was a serious art for these artists. Keaton was one of several American silent comedy stars who became very popular during the silent era. Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd were both contemporaries of Keaton, and in some respects their work is similar, but each of these silent comedians had their own distinct persona and style. So Keaton's involved his little man character. Usually this character would be at odds with the world around them. It doesn't quite fit into it, isn't quite sort of able to sort of function properly in it. A trademark of Buster Keaton was his serious facial expression, which he always kept. And that sort of allowed the audience to project whatever emotions they imagined onto his character. Very much like the Kuleshov effect, which we've studied in editing before. We do need to focus quite heavily on context, because it's a question which you could be asked, specifically about how Buster Keaton's films reflect cultural contexts associated with a particular film movement. So, first of all, don't panic. That kind of sounds like a foreign language right now, but do persevere and it will become much, much clearer. So let's just go through the sort of different parts of this question. So firstly, let's establish what we mean by a film movement. At its simplest, what we mean by this is a trend of filmmaking, which is or was pursued by a number of different filmmakers. It's not a genre, but rather a particular style of filmmaking, which could encompass various different genres. A classic example of a film movement is German Expressionism. German Expressionism was characterised by its use of shadows, contrast between light and dark, and its sort of more surrealist influences. German Expressionism was a huge influence on directors and of the time and ever since. Tim Burton, for example, is heavily inspired by the visual style of German Expressionism. He uses shadows and darkness and light in a very sort of integral way in his films. Buster Keaton is part of the American silent comedy movement in film, and as such clearly reflects various features of that movement. So I think it'd be very helpful to go through a few of those features which you'll be able to use in an exam response. 1. American silent comedy evolved from vaudeville and acrobatic physical comedy. Buster Keaton grew up as a part of a vaudeville family act, doing comedy acrobatic routines on stage. So that is part of his context, which can be seen in his impressive physical stunts across all 4 of the films. For example, the sort of the falling over that he does, the climbing in 1 week, or the dog chase across the walls in The Scarecrow. His physical comedy is a huge feature of all of the films. 2. The Buster Keaton shorts are reflective of the cultural movement of silent film comedy, because the length of around 20 minutes was typical of the 2 reelers which were popular at the time, very suited to a comedy where narrative is not as important as the gags, as the comedy, as the pratfalls, as the stunts. The 1920s saw the development of the Hollywood star system, so that involved individual performers gaining recognition, fame, success, and committed audiences who would want to see those stars on screen. They would pay money and clamour for more from their favourite film stars. So the film studios at the time would nurture those actors and encourage the use of a star persona, a sort of consistent character that they would embody across a number of different films. Keaton's particular persona involved his use of stone face, where he would stay completely expressionless regardless of what was sort of happening to him and around him. A good example is in 1 week, where the train destroys his flat pack home and the camera cuts to Keaton's expressionless face, and that kind of emphasises the joke. Audiences would begin to expect this from Buster Keaton, and their expectations would be satisfied by his continued use of it. So sort of perpetuating his star persona. 4. American silent comedy was frequently preoccupied with the mechanical age and use of technology and gadgets. This was due to this being a period of huge technological advances and industrialisation, which saw many life-changing inventions becoming available. The car, for one. We can see this in Keaton's shorts in many instances. For example, the objects in his house in The Scarecrow, the way they all have dual functions, they all do different things. They're all sort of gadgets. The house in 1 week was based on a famous short at the time made by Ford about flat pack houses for their workers. So it's based on a real thing. Buster Keaton is often represented as the little man who is sometimes overwhelmed by technology and the forces of nature. We see that even in like the newspaper in the High Sign, which causes him all sorts of difficulties as he inexplicably keeps unfolding it to absurd sort of sizes. And 5. American silent comedy was also influenced by and related to other artistic movements, most notably Surrealism, where normal logic and reason do not apply. In Surrealism, authority is consistently questioned and challenged, and the events and sort of physics don't seem to conform to the laws of the real world. That's very present in many aspects of Buster Keaton's work. Again, the newspaper is just one example. We also see the influence of other artistic movements in his work. Cubism, for example, a artistic movement made famous by Picasso. The visual look of the house in 1 week and its strange angles and slanted architecture take on a very sort of cubist perspective and overall look. And again, it's just another way that the film sort of reflects the cultural context, and it's another point that you can make in the exam. So on screen now is a key point summary. These are all useful points that you can use in an exam response on this topic. But for more on the expressive and the realist, I will post another video very shortly on that topic.